So we've got 8 hours and 36 minutes until the fresh election, but will it take place? We don't know for sure. Raila Odinga insists he has withdrawn, and also that the ballot papers that came in yesterday were a decoy. The real ballot papers were printed today. Let me try and make sense of what's happening right now in this home stretch to the fresh election. And let me bring out David Osiany, who's with me, Tommy Randall, and Njoki, Ngumi, political commentators, young people as well. So this country belongs to us, I suppose. So we're much more invested in what happens here. Sure. Somebody told me, Njoki, shame on you, Larry. Kenyans are not divided. It's the politicians.
I don't think that's true, with all apologies to the person who said that to you. I think, and I was having a conversation with somebody earlier today about it, that elections are a crisis point. At least we've been, like now we see them as crisis points, right? And so they bring out all these things that are simmering among Kenyans all the time. It's just that at other times there are other crises to focus on. So now when we have this one, and it's the point comes during which we have to now start dealing with these things without actually dealing with them. So we just kind of spotlight and highlight them. We spotlight and highlight how we actually think about women. We spotlight and highlight our own ethno-tribal divisions. We spotlight and highlight the very deep class divides there are in this country. We spotlight and highlight that some people have so much more privilege than others and so much more opportunity than others. So all of these things come to the fore, and the people that are running for office, because the shifting of power is such an important thing, they use these things to wet people's emotions, and it's very easy to use them to wet people's emotions. So I wouldn't say that Kenyans are usually fine. I think we're just good at hiding.
All right, David, the current disagreement is regarding whether or not there should be an election at all on Thursday. And the NASA people see this as as it should be obvious that because they say they have credibility issues, this election should not happen. But then the Jubilee argument, which they say is also solid, is the Supreme Court annulled the last election. They said we should go back to another election. Why are you saying now you're withdrawn?
We are at a point where there's crisis between legitimacy and legality. Now, President Uhuru Kenyatta is faced with a very peculiar time in history of making the choice to chest thump and move forward as though he wishes, or to sit down and reflect and think, look here is another man who, like me, has half of the country behind him, who feels legitimately so, or at least for him, or Raila Odinga, that the process, the illegalities and irregularities, as was described by the Supreme Court, were committed by a few people. These people, he says, have been actively part of making the election. He therefore believes, as a patient who is facing a surgeon, like Njoki here, says, you know, I am going to be facing this doctor. The doctor has been part of the processes and procedures of preparing for my surgery. I don't trust the doctor. He made the outcry from the onset. If the doctor has been part of these processes, and he said, I'm backing out. Now, Uhuru Kenyatta will either choose to move on with life and care less about half of the country and face the legitimacy crisis.
But what about the other half of the country that wants the election, that feels a victory was stolen from them?
That's why Uhuru Kenyatta, being the president, outgoing or incoming in another second term, whatever he is, must make this choice. Throughout our history, people have been faced with points when they had to make choices, not about themselves. Raila was faced with that same choice. In 1991, Moi had the choice of forgetting about repealing Section 2A. He said, you know what, guys? For the good of the country, let me choose. In 97, Harry, Moi was yet again faced with creating the IPPG for the good of the country. This is what faces Uhuru, and this is what I advise him to do.
Tommy, should this election go ahead?
Yes, it should.
Why?
Because a lot of things have been put in place to make corrections, and the other half that's against this election has refused to take part in the changes. Like the amendment of the Election Act, they refused to be appointed in committees, but they were quick to go sign up to get their paychecks in Parliament. I sat through those committees, and every time people came and brought up NASA, the people who were participating in the committee said, please go bring these NASA people and help them, tell them to come and help us make this work so that everybody's happy. They chose not to. So I think we should go ahead.
So because NASA's chosen not to participate in the process, they shouldn't hold back the entire process?
Exactly. Everybody has a constitutional right to participate in the political process in Kenya. That means if you choose to vote, that is your right. If you choose to stay home, that is your right. It is against the law to come in between anybody who wants to vote. So I encourage people who don't want to participate to stay home. And I encourage those who want to participate to show up in numbers and vote for their selected candidate.
Njoki, should this election go ahead?
I wanted to say something. in the election should go ahead versus the election shouldn't go ahead, we haven't talked about the actual process and the aspersions that have been cast upon the process by several parties across the board. It worries me deeply when people who are supposed to be intimately involved with the process have done naenda tunakam, you know, or are going on leave even before the process is done. Like, is this really the time for a break? We were asking actually earlier whether Chiloba should have gone on break earlier, because like it's been a ridiculous year for him.
But his argument.
Then wait. But then like now is the time that he's leaving. So there's a lot of oddities. As far as this process is concerned. The oddities were pointed out at the Supreme Court level. The oddities were pointed out even in the minority argument. And that nothing fundamental about the IEBC changed between what has been called a flawed election and what is going to happen on the 26th. So as far as I'm concerned, we can push one way, yes, the election should go on, and as far as the Constitution is concerned, it should, and B, the election shouldn't go on. And if we were to use constitutionality as a frame for whether an election should go on or not, let's remember that we elected a completely unconstitutional 12th Parliament. It doesn't meet the two-thirds gender rule. So as far as constitutionality is concerned, we are in the woods. As far as whether this election is going to be legit or concerned, we are in the woods as well.
Okay.
So there are many other questions that we should have answered before this yes or no. And that in and of itself has worried me.
Okay. Talking about whether or not the election should happen and the competing arguments there. David, you wanted to jump in.
No, I wanted to say I can almost ascertain there will be no election in this country.
What do you mean?
I mean that I'm a student of politics. I have studied the character Raila Odinga long enough to know that he's not a pushover. William Ruto knows this, Uhuru Kenyatta knows this. Before they were in the political scene, this is a guy who had felled the mighty Daniel Toroitich arap Moi. Be that as it may, we were talking about legitimacy versus legality, and we were pleading, I was earlier on, to the conscience of Uhuru Kenyatta, because if you were to move on as if nothing has happened in this country,
okay,
you will have begun something that will morph into something else. And every uprising, every popular uprising, you know, it kind of changes. The front lines of that battle kind of changes. You can't tell what it will be like. So today, it will be something else. Tomorrow, you are unable to deal with it.
All right. There will be no election on 26th October, is what NASA has been saying all along. And President Kenyatta says, no, you can't determine for people whether or not they will vote. It's their right.
Okay. They said something about irreducible minimums.
Yes.
But those changes, we're a country of laws. We enact laws through parliament. We don't do it on the streets. We don't do it through protests. We don't ask people to disrupt IEBC training sessions. So this is what I suggest. Let's have this election. Once the election is in place, let's go to parliament. Let's work together and solve these issues.
Do you believe NASA has any legitimate concerns in the irreducible minimums?
I think they do, but not to the point where we can't always be in election mode. It's been going on for so long. We've talked about the people who are less fortunate and them being taken for granted because the middle class and the upper class think that they're comfortable and they're the ones who won't, the lower people will not hurt. We need to go on with life so that business as usual can take place and these new laws can be enacted.
I like Tommy for saying that when you ask him whether they are legitimate concerns, Tommy is saying, David, you think this tea has poison? He says, I think it does, but not to the extent that can kill me. The irreducible, that he accepts, like all of us, that there are problems, systemic problems that need to be sorted out, and that there are legitimate concerns. There is no window for getting engaged in a process where you do not trust almost 100% that you can guarantee the outcome will be fair and a true reflection of the will of the people.
Njoki, the case against the election is that Raila Odinga says it's a pre-rigged process. But on the other hand, the Jubilee argument has always been, you went to the Supreme Court to annul the last election and you got your way. Why would you pull out now?
The thing that I've learned during this period of time when we've been in election mode is that I started this whole process really arguing vehemently against the idea of strongholds. I did, and I completely believed that the stronghold was a dying idea in Kenya, all things considered. Katiba, things have shifted, etc. The thing we have discovered is that strongholds are not a rumor. They are a fact. If your stronghold, if you're counted, the census of your stronghold is half the country, and half the country say that you will have an election and the other half say that you will not have an election. I honestly think we are in unscripted times, and there's honestly no way for me to say what's going to happen. I think either way is troubling. If we have said that the Constitution says that we should have an election on the 26th, and we do not have an election on the 26th, we will be in a constitutional crisis. But we have been in constitutional crisis before. We are in one as regards the 2/3 gender rule. We appear to be able to live through constitutional crisis. On the other hand, if we have an election that half the country is actively in disagreement about, we're going to see a situation where we are forcing the process to go on against the will of very many people. The only reason that elections have worked before is because everybody has agreed that it's fine, let's have an election now. If we have it, there's going to be a lot of questions about how to make sure that it is a workable process going ahead. The other thing I wanted to say, and allow me to say it quickly, is that I've been worried about and I tend to be a very semantic person, and I've started listening to the language that we're using. I hate that we use the word mkate and nusu mkate to imagine our government, our state, how Kenyans should, that the government is a consumable, a thing that we will eat and not have tomorrow. The state is a thing that moves on, and we should be invested in the continuity of state, because the continuity of state is the only thing that's going to make sure that the nation develops the way it should, whether we're looking at it from the point of view of market, whether we're looking at it from the point of view of addressing past injustices. The other thing is the idea of Fahali Wawili and Nyasi. And I was reflecting about this earlier today.
So the Fahali Wawili being Uhuru and Raila?
Exactly. They're not beasts. They're not animals. They're not people with horns. They're human beings. So when we say Fahali Wawili, then we internalize that Fahali Wawili cannot sit down at a table and talk. When we refer to ourselves as Nyasi, we internalize that we are helpless, and that we are not at fault, and that nobody can help us, when we are also people, and we also have a say in what this process is going to look like. So this is less about Fahalis and Nyasis and more about human beings trying to find a way together, and some human beings having so much more power than the others. And that we've reached a place where, if we have reached a place where two people are carrying each half of the country, and it's arguable who has the bigger half, if there's any such thing. If we've reached that place, then responsibility does belong to those two people to find a way to put us in a place where we can see a way forward that unites all of us.
So is dialogue the way out of this? A lot of people are now starting to suggest that Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta should talk.
Dialogue is probably a very good thing. But let me make a few corrections about what Njoki said earlier and now. Foremost, she said she's surprised that a commissioner has quit. I thought Njoki would be surprised about the allegations by the commissioner when she quit. Now, why are the reasons? What is it that informs my quitting? And Akombe, who was a commissioner, who was the mouthpiece time and time again of the commission, has stated that her life was in danger. She's been threatened. Threatened for what? For going to work? You and I know not. And that she compares herself to Chris Msando, that she believes someone may even take her life away. She has gone ahead to say that the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, the only commission that we added the obvious adjective independent when we knew it was independent, has become a political chessboard for the political class, that it's been infiltrated. So Akombe has quit and saying the commissioners have refused to be rational in their decision-making processes, and that what takes prominence in every meeting or in every suggestion made is which side they lean. Gladly for Jubilee, as she recounts, they have most of the commissioners who then overrule the chair. Now, when we look at the Mkate thing, it's about the leadership this country has had. What have the leaders we have had before tried to show Kenyans? That this is something that is to be taken. That's why we are segregated on tribal lines. Give me a second, Larry. That's why we are segregated on tribal lines. Why? Because it is ours. The campaign is, let's get it so that we can eat. So that when the president takes over, there is systematic exclusion of some parts of the country, leading to that terminology, which I too detest.
Dialogue is the way out?
I bet that dialogue is a good thing to have. Dialogue for the two leaders at this point in time. Uhuru should climb down. Raila and Uhuru need to talk and get to that point where they all agree when to have the election. Because 26 doesn't seem tenable.
Rosalina Kombe, when she quit, she said that the possibility of a credible election under this current environment was impossible. The chairman's statement also admitted without key secretariat changes, the likelihood of a credible election was very limited. Does that affect what this process is supposed to be?
Now, here's the problem. The timeline is not very conducive. Both principals are not willing to talk. one party has said, the dialogue they want is at the ballot box. Let the voters decide. Now, the question of credibility, I guess, would come later. If there's an election challenge and there's maybe some sort of judicial review to review the process to see if it was credible or not, I think those are the steps we have to take, Larry.
Do you have any doubts about the credibility of this process?
I do. I do have doubts about the credibility of the process. But those are things, like I said, we wouldn't have an idea. Last time, the voters did their part. We all went to the ballot box, we voted. We trusted in the system that the things would work out. Then it came out later, according to the Supreme Court, that things weren't, it's a process, it's not an event, that, as Maraga had said. So I think still we should give the IEBC a chance and solve this problem in Parliament through these laws with both parties present, since it's not going to happen now. They've both made it clear that it's not going to happen. So, like Jubilee says, the dialogue is at the ballot box.
Njoki?
I've had an incredible sense of deja vu because give IEBC a chance is what we were saying just before August the 8th. So for us to have circled back to this place after a whole entire Supreme Court process, for me is a little jarring. I want to say that I wasn't surprised by her quitting, as my colleague here has said. It wasn't so much that. The thing that has surprised me is that we've gotten to a place where Kenyans are now speaking the language of the Supreme Court, where we all know what amicus curiae is and etc et al. So for me, a wide description of an election as not being credible is a rather vague statement. So we should have trusted Kenyans to be able to understand when you say this election cannot be credible, what exactly do you mean?
Okay.
There's a talk about, yes, there's individuals in this process who are going to be problematic. There's what, this, that, the other. We are seeing that electoral officials are being harassed when they go and try to have a training. So there's ways in which we can already see that there are problems brewing, and that there are so many worries that we've not really addressed before we even jump into the process. That said, I feel like the IEBC officials, and it's going to be a very rough thing to say, but they owe Kenyans more than a blanket statement about the general process not being credible. Tell us more. Tell us exactly what you mean. If you're going to become a whistleblower, then whistleblow. Do it. Do it. Let's hear. We're already in these choppy waters. If they're going to become choppier, let them become choppier.
Okay. I want to play a sound clip for you guys because we covered this yesterday. General Madowo, did you guys see this? He was talking about politics and some people are upset about that. Watch.
Mengi yamesemwa kuhusu kura zinazokuja. Kura zinazokuja ni kura ambazo zitafanyika kwa sababu katiba imesema kwamba kila mtu ana haki. Kwa hivyo basi tulisema tarehe 26 kutakuwa na kura. Wale ambao watataka kwenda wataenda, wale ambao hawatataka kwenda hawataenda, na siku hiyo itapita na tutaendelea na Kenya itaendelea.
David Osiany, is this inappropriate? Some people feel that a man this senior in the military should not be talking politics.
Larry, I have always admonished guys to cherish silence. Silence cannot be misquoted. Can never be misquoted. So, you know, everyone will hear what they want to hear from what Madowo said. Because what is his role in this process? You know, the army is not the police. The army does nothing. This is an internal thing. The police are to ensure there is law and order. Even though they seem to have been used by the government to try and target specific communities. And even though we still have my very good friend, who I am ashamed, would say words as being a member of an outlawed sect as Chinkororo, and yet he is the CS for Interior, who ought to guarantee Kenyans their safety. I don't know what drove Madowo to try and speak about the election when he himself comes from a region which I know only too well will not turn out to vote. It's uncalled for.
Is that your view of these things, Tommy?
I mean, it was good advice, but based on his position in government, it comes off as inappropriate. So yeah, I would have to agree with my panelist.
Njoki, what do you think?
I don't even, the army, man, like why?
Yeah,
Why? Yeah. There was no need. In fact, I want to just take this opportunity to change the subject back to. I'm just.
Well, let me change the subject now.
Let me change the subject. I want to talk a little bit about the workers that we saw earlier, because it's very easy for us to get caught up in this todo sobre Ukenya, and then kind of lose track of the things that are actually happening and actually hurting actual people.
Yes.
You know, not people who have their feelings hurt and are refusing to talk to one another. But if we go and see the shenanigans that were happening at the dock workers union meeting
in Mombasa,
which were now reminding us of what was happening in the Ugandan parliament the other day. So there's that. Then we have the agricultural workers meeting. And remember, we still have the nurses strike going on over 100 days now. We just concluded a very long doctor strike. Teachers on and off all the time. I always wonder about, and you know, these are all employed workers, right? So these are people who are informal employed. When we think about how unhappy these people are, and we extrapolate that to what must be happening in the informal economy, because a lot of people who are informal employed are the ones who do bolster the informal economy, either by buying their things, by further employing other people, by running side hustles, doing all of these things. And so if we have this entire cohort of people who are not being treated well, who do not feel respected by situations of authority, etc., there's a huge problem brewing in as far as how this country views its workers. And we cannot then say we respect workers and we also want our economy to continue and for the country to go on. That was the first thing. The second thing, in as far as the dock workers thing, I realized that, and I've been saying this for a while, the spirit of this country is not right now, it's not really a spirit of listening to one another. So that dock workers meeting was going to be a shenanigan. I think it was the wrong time to have it. Maybe they should have waited to have it after the polls. I don't know, but it's just a weird, it's in the air. This thing of where somebody says a wrong thing and it's over. It's kind of in the air. I'm not sure whether they were going to get anything completely productive done. The same can be said for the trade unions that are having issues currently. There's conflict in the air, and I'm not saying that there's conflict in the sense that people will leave their homes on the 26th and there will be active physical conflict, but we are in a space that's inviting conflict right now. And so there's ways in which the political thing is feeding it, and that worries me deeply.
Larry, I want to say, we are in a moment of crisis. It calls on those of us who are in the hallowed spots of influence, such as all of us here today, and much more, the fourth estate, to reach out and speak for the injustices and try to get the Kenya that we want, to appeal to both political sides without being divisive. That when a young man and when an ethnic community is targeted in Kisumu, stand up and speak for it. When the rich man who thought that this can't catch up with him has an injustice taken to his doorstep, the son of the Bob Mill owner, shot dead, and the police show up there, and the police are told by the people inside there that go back, and the police tell us they went back without investigating what really was happening when someone died. Speak up for that injustice. When we have an outlawed sect regrouping and there's a resurgence, and you know very well that those affected will not be people from the backyards of Raila Odinga. There will be people from the very backyards of the president. Speak out against these injustices. When we have a country that is literally dancing on the precipice of a catastrophe, and we have egos that won't melt, speak out against them. We are entrusted with the duty to try and salvage a nation on the precipice, and it calls on us to do our honest duty, all of us, NASA or Jubilee alike, because someday we are going to be judged by the actions we took when it called on us to.
Tommy, what is a way out of this current crisis, in your view?
We're really in uncharted waters here. So personally, this is what I would advise. Go out and vote. Stay away from violence. Stay away from hate speech. Avoid situations like that. Let's spend money. Let's help the economy grow. After the elections, we can resolve this. We can resolve this.
How can you resolve this after the election when there are people, one half of the country, that feel this election itself is a problem because they cannot trust that the outcome will be will be representative of their views?
Larry, first of all, not everybody agrees with the Supreme Court decision, right? But we're a country of laws and we abide by the law. That's the decision that was made, all right? The Supreme Court never implicated people specifically, all right? IEBC is an independent body. They need to clean house themselves. Okay, political pressure on them is caused lots of problems, these resignations and all these kinds of allegations. So let's cool the political temperatures and let them dialogue at the ballot. Let people decide at that point, and we go to parliament.
I want to ask my colleague, and with all due respect, how can people spend money that they don't have? You know, because the issue currently is that there's a lot of small businesses that are folding.
Yes.
There's a lot of people that cannot pay loans, and then these are the people who can access some of these things in formal structures. So now, if we dial back to what's happening in informal sectors, places that maybe could employ 300 people are now employing 100, thinking about cutting down to 50 or 45. People who are manufacturing are saying, we can't even manufacture at the rate at which we used to manufacture because nobody is buying, etc. So in as far as spending money to bolster the economy, unless there are ghost coins or, I don't know, where we can all maybe get them and then we can all feel better. I don't know how that would work.
What I mean is your day-to-day spending, your regular everyday stuff that you would normally do. No one is going to make any major investments at this point of time in this political climate.
And that's the thing that I'm saying has been affected, and we cannot continue to ignore that. We have been part of building this thing where we look to two people to carry half of the nation each, and we can see them cracking under that kind of pressure. So as far as I'm concerned, these two people have a duty. They have a duty to us to sit down and make this thing work. Because now we are the ones who are looking to them. So if they sit down and they come out of a meeting holding hands and singing, we can all talk about the problematics of that and of what they put us through for the last 10 months later. But there's a thing that will shift if they're able to do that. Even if they are able to kind of cover over this last disgusting 10 months with a blanket of temporary, with a blanket of a temporary stalemate, all the ugly things that are brewing will still not be solved by a meeting of these two minds.
Okay.
And so the thing that we need to do is sit down and try to solve these issues when we are not in this already fraught time.
Okay.
So when we have to deal with elections versus workers issues and trade union issues, everybody's going to choose elections and nobody's going to listen to the workers.
Right.
That's why the nurses are where they are today, and they shouldn't be. Because if we think about the effects on the public health of this country, it's been catastrophic. And it will continue to be.
Let me make a
I'm out of time, sir, so real quickly.
In today's paper, Kathy Kilonzo has probably made the best proposition I have seen in recent times. She points to sets of laws that allow the chairman to be able to move forward this election. And it's in the interest of the country. It is what happened in Nigeria when they were faced with an election, and it was going to be a crisis, a bloody one. And the head of the election then just decided, let's move this forward. In Kathy's submission today in the paper, she points out to me Chebukati as the only solution where it seems Raila and Uhuru cannot agree. Chebukati needs to bite the bullet and say, you know what? I am the national returning officer. I'm pushing this by 60 days or 90 days, and let's then challenge that in court. That's the only way to get this country to calm down.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. Njoki, Ngumi, David Osiany and Tommy Randall, appreciate your time. Incidentally, Kathy Kilonzo needs to come on my show. Please. She has not been on here for, I think, 4 or 5 years, maybe 4.5 years. Kathy, please take my call. You need to come back, and in these extraordinary times, we need all the voices we can get on.